Hello, everyone. My name is Ian. I'm a tech advisor and a software architect. And yes, by the way, I actually still write code. Yeah. Now, before we dive in, I just want to thank DDD Melb and all the sponsors for putting this event together. Without their support and your votes, I wouldn't have the opportunity to terrify myself today. So thank you, everyone. And yeah, I was here last year, and it was such a great community that it gave me the courage to do something that I've wanted to do for many, many years, but never really even tried. So I'm hoping that today some of you, or at least one person, can be inspired to submit a talk for the one next year, because yeah, it's a great community, and everyone I've worked with have been incredibly helpful and supportive, and there's been a lot of training and assistance with just getting through it. So yeah, just thank you, DDD Melb, and thank you all of you for coming here on your Saturday. And speaking of terrifying, as I mentioned, this is my first time speaking, and let alone speaking at a conference. Thank you. So if there's any bumps along the way or anything like that, I just appreciate your patience. And I'm sure you've already been hounded about the bingo. I've got 2 stamps already, so you know, get on it. Octopus Deploy do want you to do a backflip, which was quite hard before coffee, but you know, you do what you do for swag. But yeah, who knows? You might win something, so definitely make sure you go say hello to everyone. But yeah, let's get into it. So today's talk is about how I've overcomplicated software development through my career. I've built software across a variety of industries, ranging from ERP systems written in programming languages that I'm pretty sure will predate most of this room, to mobile apps for wastewater treatment plants. And while I could tell you about how fascinating it is to turn poop water into drinking water, I'll probably save those stories for another day. Instead, I want to talk to you about how frustrating writing software can be at times. I'm sure you all know those moments. For me, they usually involve me yelling at my computer, wondering why nothing works, cursing some goddamn awful code, and simultaneously cursing the person that wrote it. You know what I'm talking about. The code that makes you question all your life decisions that led you to this moment. And then comes that gut-wrenching moment. As you're trawling through the Git log, it becomes extremely evident that that person was you. Oh, so clever, Ian. We've all been there, right? And one would think that experience would shield you away from these kind of mistakes, that after years of experience writing and reviewing code, I would have it all figured out. But instead, I've noticed something else. Writing software feels like it's gotten harder, not easier. Early on in my career, I could code for hours on end, forgetting all basic human needs, like eating and drinking water, although my coffee cup never went empty. The solutions just flowed. I felt like I was John Carmack, minus the genius part. And I really miss those times. See, because programming, it used to be an escape for me, a place to have fun and build things, a way to assert some sort of control in a very chaotic and unpredictable world. How about you? Do you remember when you first started coding? That pure joy of making something work, that rush of excitement when you built your first real application? Ah, those were such simple times, when the focus was on actually solving problems and not navigating a maze of best practices and rigid design patterns. And for me, somewhere along the way, this has changed. Nowadays, I spend entire days agonizing over architectural decisions for code I haven't even written yet. It's as if the more I've learned, the more paralyzed I've become. All these patterns and best practices swirling around in my head like a nagging teacher, making me second guess every decision I have to make. And look, the irony isn't lost on me. What began as a creative and liberating outlet is now weighed down by its own complexity. Each line of code now carries a burden and multitude of considerations. Is it scalable? How about, am I going to maintain this? How do I test it? These concepts that once felt empowering and fun to work with now feel like chains holding me back. And I really don't think I'm alone in feeling this way. And that's exactly what I want to explore with you guys today. Why has writing software become so complicated? And more importantly, how do we get back to that simple joy of building things? Because the truth is, we have all been guilty of overcomplicating things. I know I have, and I can show you exactly what I mean. Let me take you back to a particularly humbling moment in my career. Honestly, it was actually pretty embarrassing. At the time, I was building tablet apps for asset managers and field technicians. And I got tasked with creating an iOS view to navigate an asset hierarchy. It needed the usual features such as search and select with an expanding and collapse on the hierarchy. So in my brain, nothing too complicated. I'd built stuff like this before. But having worked on this client, I knew one thing. Their asset hierarchy was massive, which meant performance was going to be a top consideration for me. So naturally, I dusted off my old algorithms and data structures textbook. You know the one that somehow survived all your house moves. And after hours and hours of research, I felt like I had chosen the right data structure and was on my way to the perfect solution. I spent days, if not weeks, crafting this masterpiece. Even writing my own binary search tree implementation, because why not? Looking back, I was probably getting some sort of revenge on an old university assignment. But just before heading off on holidays, I pushed my code, feeling incredibly proud of what I had built. But while I was away, channeling my inner Alex Honnold, a bug appeared. A colleague tried to step in and fix it. Key word here is he tried. He couldn't make heads or tails of the solution. And honestly, I don't blame him. It was complex, it was dense, it was full of abstractions, and honestly, a lot of it wasn't needed. So with the project on a tight deadline, the owner of the company had to get involved. You know what he did? He deleted my entire solution. Just deleted it. All of it, gone. And then, to really drive the point home, he replaced my masterpiece with a very simple dictionary-based implementation and solved the problem in under 30 minutes. Talk about humbling, right? Here I was, convinced I had built this elegant, sophisticated solution, only to learn that the simplest approach was not just better, it took less than an hour to implement. It's a classic case of premature optimization. I was so focused on theoretical performance gains that did not even exist at the time, I'd lost sight of what actually mattered, which was the problem at hand. All the client was asking for was a simple search and select view with some expanding and collapse features. But instead, I was just fixated on the theoretical performance problems. And the sad fact of the matter is that the real damage wasn't the 2 weeks of wasted development time or creating a maintenance nightmare. I burned through the goodwill of my team. And I turned a simple feature into a crisis, all because I thought I knew better. As I reflected on this, something kind of dawned on me. This kind of complexity and troubles can be entirely avoided. When I set out to build the solution, my intention was not to overcomplicate it. I thought I was doing the right thing, trying to follow best practices, be a proper engineer, trying to future-proof the solution, you know? The stuff that you get drilled into your brain early on in your career. But in hindsight, with a little basic forethought, and maybe just talking with my colleagues first, and instead of just diving head deep into optimizing the solution, we could have prevented this entire debacle. Now, I wish I could say that this wasn't the first and last time this happened throughout my career. Unfortunately, it was not. And that led me to a bigger question. How do I stop myself from making these mistakes? But before I could answer that, I knew I needed to understand something a bit more fundamental. What exactly is complexity? At its core, complexity comes from having many interconnected parts that make something difficult to understand or reason about. Or to put it more formally, as how it's mentioned in the Cambridge Dictionary, something is complex when it has the state of many parts and being difficult to understand or find an answer to. Think of a light switch. You flip it up, the light turns on. You flip it down, the light turns off. It's simple, right? You can verify it works by testing exactly 2 states. There's nothing inherently complicated about that, if you forget about electricity and how all of that stuff works. But the light switch itself is quite simple. Whereas software systems, they are nothing but simple. They can have countless states at any given time. They can interact with dozens of other systems simultaneously and break in ways we've never imagined. They can be very hard to describe, hard to test, and sometimes they feel impossible to monitor. And that is the reality of it. Software systems are inherently complex. We cannot avoid that fact, nor can we design ourselves away from it. Think about a real-time trading system. You're dealing with thousands of transactions per second. Or how about a train traffic control software? Not only do you have to ensure that everything is running on schedule, you have to ensure that things don't bloody collide. See, this kind of complexity, it comes from the problem itself, not the implementation of it. This is what we like to call essential complexity. But when it comes to the implementation of these solutions, well, that is where things can go wrong. In an effort to simplify things, we lose sight of the actual problem at hand. There's a fine line between a good abstraction and a leaky one. And through this is where we introduce a different kind of complexity, through the unintentional mistakes that we make, the over-engineered solutions, and the unnecessary abstractions, where a dictionary would do just fine instead of a binary search tree. This is the extra complexity that we add ourselves. We call this accidental complexity. Now, I wish I could say I came up with these brilliant insights myself. It would make me seem like a very smart individual, but I didn't. I actually found them in a paper called No Silver Bullet, written by Frederick Brooks in 1986. And this paper blew my mind. 2 reasons. One, for how long ago it was written, it still felt starkly relevant to today, as if it was written just weeks ago. The problems that he proposes and talks about in the paper are problems that we deal with today in our jobs. And I found that fascinating. And secondly, seeing this differentiation between essential complexity and accidental complexity, it really triggered a light bulb moment in me. I suddenly realized that I'd probably spent a significant portion of my career creating accidental complexity instead of focusing on the real business problems. Let me give you another example. At the time, I was venturing into a tech lead role, and my team and I, we were building mobile applications that integrated with enterprise resource planning systems. And we had a pretty interesting challenge on our hands. See, we had to maintain feature parity between iOS and Android devices while simultaneously trying to scale our development team. And the problems kept piling up. Clients would ask, why does the iOS app do this, but the Android doesn't, and vice versa, let alone trying to describe to them that they're completely different operating systems and that on iOS you don't actually get a keyboard for a number, which still perplexes me. And bugs would appear on one platform, but not the other. And don't even get me started on the damn storyboard merge conflicts. So feeling out of my depth and desperate for a solution, I did what I always do. I dove straight into research mode. And that is when I discovered a thing called UberRibs. UberRibs is a cross-platform architecture. It allows you to write native mobile applications in a framework that shares a logical structure so you can easily compare business logic between the 2 code bases. You can easily write tests that are similar. And I thought, God, this is fantastic. This has to be the solution to our problems. And if Uber was using it, it's got to be good, right? Trust me, I was very wrong. See, Ribs wasn't just another architecture. It was built with scalability in mind, but not the type of performance scalability we've already covered. It was designed to scale teams. I'm talking hundreds, if not thousands, of engineers working on the same mobile app at a time. Meanwhile, in our company, we had fewer than 10 people. So instead of helping us, this new framework introduced more complexity than we needed. There was a lot of boilerplate. There was a whole new paradigm shift that we had to think about how we write our code. And I forced that upon my team, thinking, guys, you just need a get on top of this, like this is the solution. But in the end, it just slowed us down. It didn't make us any better at what we were building. We still had the same amount of bugs. We still had the same incrementation cycle. In the end, it was simply the wrong tool for the job. And I feel like this pattern is not unique to me. In a way, I think it plays across our entire industry. We see tech giants like Netflix or Amazon running massive distributed systems with microservices and kubernetes. And suddenly, everyone needs them as well. Never mind that Netflix is optimizing to stream to billions of users simultaneously, or that Amazon has the infrastructure needs that most companies would never even come close to. For some reason, we convince ourselves that what works for them must work for us. And so we introduce this accidental complexity for problems that we do not have and may yet never have. Which raises a really interesting question. If we know accidental complexity makes our lives harder, why do we do it? And it's a tough question to ask ourselves. But let's face it, we can't help ourselves. As Neil Ford so wellly put it, developers are drawn to complexity like moths to a flame, frequently with the same results. See, we crave it. We chase it. We convince ourselves we need it. And then we act surprised when our solutions blow up in our face. Honestly, this was probably the hardest part in preparing for this talk. It's so easy to point fingers at complexity and list all its faults. But to ask myself, well, why do I make things complicated? That was a much, much harder question to ask. Because understanding why we do what we do is a question that scientists and philosophers have pondered for centuries. So who am I to say why you, or you, or you, or anyone else in this room overcomplicates things? I can't. So instead of trying to solve the mysteries of human nature, I decided to focus on something more manageable, my own mistakes. I wanted to understand what's really going on beneath the surface. Let's go back to my elaborate asset hierarchy solution that got deleted, might I remind you. What was really going on there? Well, I feel like some context is quite important. We were bringing on new members into the team. I was transitioning into a tech lead role. And I was dealing with classic imposter syndrome. I had that nagging feeling that if I couldn't prove that I was smart enough to lead this team, they would doubt my abilities as a leader. I had a challenging relationship with my new manager, and it made me feel like I had to justify my very existence to him. And if I was being really honest, I had a desperate need to show everyone how clever I was. So, why I overcomplicated things? It's actually quite simple. It's because of my ego. I wanted to prove myself. I wanted to feel like I belonged in the new role. And deep down, I was terrified. I was scared that if I couldn't show my colleagues that I knew what I was talking about, if I couldn't prove to my manager that I fitted in this role, then my job would be at risk. And that experience taught me a very hard but important lesson. Simplicity isn't just elegant, it's practical. It's about solving the problem in the most straightforward way, not the most impressive-looking way. And ironically, sometimes the simplest solutions are the ones that earn you the most respect. The more I thought about this, something really hit me. We're human. We are complex by design. Could the reason why I overcomplicated things be due to a factor of fears and insecurities and emotions going through me? And as I dug deeper, I really started to see the same pattern repeat itself. Like a time I tried to push GraphQL into our organization. See, at the time, I was quite frustrated with how our mobile apps were integrating with the data layer. I felt like REST just wasn't the right solution, and I'd heard about this GraphQL thing, and it's like, okay, cool, you have reduced payloads, and that seems to make sense to me. And meanwhile, a friend of mine, he had landed a really cool job at a startup where they had beer on tap. Meanwhile, most exciting perk at the company that I was working at was an unlimited supply of Mentos. Fresh breath for everyone. See, he was working with the latest and greatest tech. So when he mentioned GraphQL, I was like, well, we need that. Why? Because at the time, there was actually a deeper issue going on. It wasn't my frustration with the technology stack. It worked perfectly fine for our needs. I was worried about my own future. I was working as a mobile engineer, writing integration software for ERP systems. I was not working on the cutting edge. I was not working on the latest and greatest tech. And that worried me. I was really starting to question my future employability. And so, without realizing it, I'd fallen into the trap of resume-driven development. Making a tech decision not because it was the best fit for the problem, because it looked good on my resume. And let's be honest, this is not entirely our fault. The industry encourages it. Job adverts are filled with the latest buzzwords. Recruiters filter candidates by whatever shiny new framework they're learning. And hiring often prioritizes the hard skills instead of our problem-solving abilities, our abilities to think and communicate. And it's a shame. Because what really matters is not whether someone could explain in fine detail how something like entity framework works, but it's whether they can think critically and adapt. But I digress. Back to complexity. So in my attempt to simplify data fetching on mobile, I was actually creating a whole new set of problems. I was asking the team to learn a new framework. Again, we had to spin up a bunch of GraphQL servers. We had to rewrite our data layer. And we had to restructure how we handled data. So in an attempt to chase what I thought was simplicity, I was introducing unnecessary complexity. In essence, all I had done was shift the problem elsewhere. Because sometimes complexity doesn't disappear. You just move it. Just put it over here. Try hide it behind the rug. Like when I tried to simplify our architecture with ribs, only to be buried in boilerplate and rigid structures and patterns. designed for massive teams, not our small team. Over the past few years, you've probably seen this play out in your own organizations or across others. You break up a monolith because, well, it's turned into a big ball of mud, and you can't have that nowadays, right? Only to introduce a whole new set of complexity, such as microservices, some of which you need to then try fix with Kubernetes, because deployment is painful, which just leads you to a whole new set of problems. And then, before you know it, you're lost at sea, drowning in YAML files. And this isn't just theory, it's something we've known for decades. Let's go back to No Silver Bullet by Fred Brooks. The proof is in the title. No silver bullet. There is no magic solution in software that is going to suddenly make everything easier. And yet, in our pursuit of better tools and abstractions, we often lose sight of the essence of the true problem we're trying to solve. We chase complexity thinking it will future-proof our solutions, but often it's just shifting it elsewhere. Which is why, as a wise friend once told me, choose your complexity wisely, my friend, for the wrong choice may come back and haunt you. But let's be real. Not all accidental complexity is entirely avoidable. Sometimes you just don't know any better. You will make decisions with the best information you have at the time, and you will be wrong. And I want to tell you that's okay. We're human. We all make mistakes, and that's how we learn. So don't worry too much about it. So after all, if there's one thing I've realized, is that the reasons that I've overcomplicated things weren't just technical. They were deeply human, driven by fear, ego, and insecurity. But recognizing these emotions, that was the first step towards finding a better way. I'm curious at this point, have any of you felt this way? Can you think of times when you've unnecessarily added complexity? No judgment here. We've all been there, right? So, how do we fight our tendency to overcomplicate things? I wish I could stand here and say I have all the answers, but I don't, and I'm really sorry to disappoint you. What I do have are some thoughts and simple practices that have really helped me. Firstly, let's remember those classic principles we conveniently forget when we're trying to be clever. YAGNI, you ain't gonna need it. The next time you catch yourself trying to cram in some feature that was not part of the original spec because you think, but what if X happens? Maybe just stop and ask yourself, do I really need this? Or KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. Honestly, I feel like my mum taught me this one. Do I really need to explain it further? But principles alone are not enough. We're too good at justifying complexity to ourselves. And that is why not working in isolation is crucial. I am a firm believer in collaborative software development. When we're left to our own devices, it's too easy to over-engineer solutions and convince ourselves that they're necessary. So practices like mob programming, or also referred to as ensemble programming, may feel extremely inefficient and weird at first, but having teammates ask why every 5 minutes is probably one of the best complexity detectors I've ever had. And an old boss used to say, if you can't explain something to your grandmother, you probably don't know it well enough. So I want you to think, if you can't explain or justify something to your teammates, do you really need that thing? Similarly, techniques like event storming from domain-driven design help teams focus on real problems instead of getting bogged down in the technical hypotheticals. For those unfamiliar with event storming, it is a collaborative workshop where everyone involved, developers, product managers, domain experts, and sometimes even end users, come together and map out business process in the terms of events. These events are simple, natural language descriptions of things that happen in the system, like an order was placed, payment was received, inventory updated. Now, the beauty of event storming is how low-tech it is. There's no fancy software involved. It's just sticky notes and markers on a wall. Everyone contributes, no matter their technical expertise. The goal? To visualize an entire flow of a system or business process in a way that is clear to everyone in the room. And why does this help reduce complexity? Because when you're focusing on the real events of the business, you're not getting bogged down in all the technical hypotheticals. And while on the topic of collaborative software development, it brings me to something that's been on my mind a lot lately, the shift towards remote work. Now, don't get me wrong. I completely understand the benefits of flexibility, focus time, and the ability to work in your pajamas. But I'll be honest, there is a part of me that feels sad about how much we've lost when it comes to genuine collaboration. What really bums me out is hearing from people who are forced back into the office only to sit on Teams calls all day because not everyone else showed up. That's not collaboration. That's just working remotely with a longer commute. What really excites me, though, is working with organizations that embrace collaboration, places that bring people together, not just because they have to, because they see the value in it. Those face-to-face moments, the quick conversations by a whiteboard, the shared laughter when something breaks, those are the moments where the joy of building software really comes to life. So while remote work isn't going anywhere, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, I think we need to be more intentional about creating those moments of creating real connection. Because it's these spaces where magic happens, and where simplicity often reveals itself too. And here's some last lessons that took me way too long to learn. Don't start with an abstraction. Let them emerge naturally. The ones that feel obvious at the time will be the correct one. It's actually okay to repeat yourself. I used to take dry as a gospel, avoiding repetition at all costs. But extreme dry introduces coupling. And coupling can breed complexity. You end up connecting parts that were once isolated, so be careful. Favor readability over cleverness. I know how satisfying it is to take something that is 10 lines and squish it into one line, but tomorrow you is going to hate yourself, and your colleagues will hate you even more. So just don't do it. Most importantly, be mindful. Keep asking yourself, what am I truly trying to achieve here? Because at the end of the day, it's not about proving how clever we are. It's about building software that helps people. And funny enough, that is what's brought me back to the joy of coding. By embracing simplicity and collaborating more, I've rediscovered the satisfaction that once felt lost. So today we've taken a journey through my over-engineered missteps, uncovered the human sides of accidental complexity, and explored ways to resist the urge to overcomplicate. And in the end, software is inherently complicated, and that is not going away. But as Einstein once said, make things as simple as possible, but not simpler. And I'll be honest, I still catch myself overcomplicating things, but at least now I recognize it. Writing simple code is hard. It requires confidence to do less, not more. It takes courage to say, this is good enough. But your future self and your team will thank you. So when I started preparing for this talk, I wanted to understand why software development feels hard. And what I realized, it's not about the code. It's about us, our need to prove ourselves, to chase trends or avoid irrelevance, which often creates this accidental complexity. But that pure joy of making something work, it's not gone. It's buried. By embracing simplicity and collaboration, that joy becomes accessible again. So maybe, just maybe, by allowing yourself to solve the problem in front of us, instead of the ones that we imagine, we can rediscover what made us love coding in the first place. Thank you, everyone.